This conference will now be recorded.
So, do you want to recap or shall I proceed? Because we talked about two of that ways of connecting to S3 buckets, and we have to talk about the third one, storage integration. Okay, let me go
Can
ahead
you
and talk.
recap, Shekhar?
Okay, Bhaskar. So, do you guys get a chance to create an account and then work on this?
No, we I haven't done.
Okay. So, whenever see this AWS can the Snowflake can be implemented on any three cloud providers. So now think that you have implemented the Snowflake on AWS. That means Snowflake is also part of AWS. It's a user behind the curtain. What happens, for AWS account, and then you store your data in S3 buckets. It's all your custom thing. You are the owner of the account, and you know what are the files that you store, what you can do in AWS. But Snowflake is just a wrapper on top of AWS. It doesn't show you anything at all. It's completely Snowflake only for you. You don't need to worry about the pricing part of it, how the things gets created inside AWS. Everything is managed by Snowflake. But at the end of the day, Snowflake is also a user in AWS. And when you create your custom account or you create an account, you are also an user in AWS. So they two can talk to each other because same platform, right? So the talking and trying to get the data can be done in three different ways. And we are going to talk to S3 buckets. Why S3? S3 is called simple storage service, where a lot of companies store the data in S3 buckets. From there they
Sir, I
can
have one
read.
question, sir. Sir,
Sure.
sorry to interrupt, sir. Sir, if Snowflake is not used AWS as first cloud while during creating, let's say if it is using Azure or Google Cloud, but
Hmm.
in that case, Snowflake user is not the user of AWS, right?
Yes, that
And
is
that
true.
in that case, how do we use S3 buckets? Yeah, S3
That
buckets from Snowflake. How do we treat that?
that is the third option. That's what I'm gonna talk about.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, sir. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So so now all the companies, most of the companies store the data in S3 buckets. The reason is, right, it's very pretty simple to store, and it can be accessed anywhere from the world, and then you can have all kinds of security around it. So there are a lot of advantages. And then the AWS ecosystem itself helps you to query the S3 data. You have applications called Athena, and then there is one more which directly reads your S3 buckets, and then as if S3 is your storage, and the front web UI is Athena, and you can start running your queries. You can join. You can do all kinds of stuff. There are a lot of applications that helps you to read from S3 buckets. And reading and writing into S3 buckets is very fast. They'll give you, and whenever you store your data in S3 buckets, the data is replicated into three places, and it is safe, secure. And we talked about durability and availability. I've seen that, right? These are all the features. So people started using S3 as a main media of storage. Now, even though if you have Oracle, and you can directly load data from Oracle to Snowflake. But people, a lot of companies, they prefer the route of getting into S3 and from there to Snowflake. Reason, they can keep the data there for archival purposes and all this stuff. So they go that route. So no matter what might be the business case, if you are trying to load data from AWS S3 buckets into Snowflake. Both of them are in the cloud. Both of them are in the AWS. There are three ways of accessing that. One is using the first one is using by creating a role. The second one is by creating a user, and third one is by creating a storage integration. So the first part is right, creating a role. So why do you want to create a role? Because AWS, whenever you are trying to access, right? First thing is S3 buckets. S3 buckets they have a lot of privileges that you can set up on S3 buckets. What kind of security privileges? Somebody can see them. Somebody can put data into the S3 buckets. Somebody can get it. Somebody can delete it. Somebody can look at so there are many. These are all the privileges that you have on S3 buckets, and you can configure them to whom what they want to have. What kind of action can be done. So for that configuring, we use a policy. So in the policy, we'll mention this is my S3 bucket, and these are the actions that I want to be done on top of it. So first, you go ahead and create an S3 bucket. And buckets, whenever you create an S3 bucket, right? You need a region. So you'll figure out a region where your S3 buckets should be created, and then you create the bucket. Bucket is nothing but a root folder, like Windows Explorer, right? You will have the bucket, and in the bucket you can have folders, and you can have files, and you can do all kinds of things. So now you are trying to create a policy on the bucket, saying that these are the actions that if you are trying to grant, if you can grant policy is nothing but the privileges that you are setting on top of the bucket, and you grant these privileges to a user, or you can grant these privileges to a role. So if you grant it to a role can be used by a user to log in, or a user can directly access this bucket. The first thing is role. So we created a role and we created a policy, and then we assign this policy to a role. And then when you're trying to assign this to a role, right, you should know what is the Snowflake, so to which particular account you want to grant this role to. So we want to grant it to Snowflake so that Snowflake can access this particular S3 buckets, data from S3 buckets. But whenever you're trying to create an role for a other user on top in AWS, you need the ID, account ID of that particular user, and then the external ID of that particular user. But in the initial phase, we don't have the Snowflake account ID or user ID, external ID. So we use a dummy ID and then create the role, and using the role we go and create a stage, and then when you describe the stage you will get the user's IAM user ID, that means the account ID of Snowflake, and then the external ID of Snowflake, and you get those things, come back to AWS and try to change in the role. It's called the relationships that we already established. We'll come back and then change the. Now we'll instead of the dummy ID, we'll give the exact external ID, and then the Snowflake account ID, IAM user ID details, and then you should be good enough to create a stage. And once you have the stage, you can list the data. You can do based on the permissions that you have given on the S3 buckets. If you have only list, then from Snowflake you can only list the data. If you have put and get with list, you can list it. You have put, you can get, and you can do all kinds of stuff. So the privileges tells you what you can do. Okay, this is pretty much about the role. And now the second option is the user credentials. You can by using the user, you can create, you can access the S3 buckets. So the same way when you log into AWS, and then there is an IAM module, identity access module, where you created your policies and roles. You go there, create a user, and once you are trying to create a user can a policy can be attached to a user. So the S3 buckets that you have created and the policy that you created on top of S3 buckets, you go choose the policy and attach it to the user, and then come back to Snowflake and then create a stage by using the user credentials, access key and secret access key. So once you have that, then you're good. That is the easiest way. You can do all kinds of stuff. That is by the user credentials. Are you okay, guys? Are you able to follow me?
Yeah, Shekhar.
So the third one is the storage integration. Okay, let's go and do the storage integration part of AWS. So my slide deck covers all the AWS storage integration. Okay, and then what is an AWS private link? Did I tell you about private link, right? Guess you need to speak to me.
Mm,
Uh, no, Shekhar, we are not discussing anything
No,
on private
Sagar.
link.
Okay, so AWS private link is no, I gave some introduction, but I did not talk in detail. So let me go ahead and then
I think we talked about private cloud. Not sure about private
cloud
link,
and link.
Sagar.
Yeah, basically the same thing. One second, let me. So the reason I'm going to talk about this, I'll explain you. Okay. See what happened. Yeah. Okay. Right. So think this is an AWS, right? How do I draw? Okay. It's better to draw something on the paint and explain you. 1 second. Go to meeting. There is a drawing board. How do we open drawing board? My meetings. No. Anyway, I'll make it simple, guys. I don't want to take most of the time for this one. Okay. But when you draw it on drawing board, right, it's not that good. So think this is your AWS. Okay. How do you access AWS? If you have S3 buckets, how do you access them? You might be logging to the console or you might be logging to the AWS browser, and from there click your S3 and go there and upload, do all this stuff, right? That means
Yes.
normally whenever you are trying to do something, so you can set up a virtual private cloud on AWS. So what is virtual private cloud? Something like you can make it much more secure. You have your applications on AWS and you can decide which particular and which IP addresses cannot access. So you are trying to build a security around the application, right? Whenever you are trying to connect to office, they open particular IP addresses where people can access, and they'll block the other stuff. And when you have a VPN, you can connect to your office using the VPN, and then you will get a dynamic address which is part of that particular your office and then you can start accessing the applications. Same way, whenever you try to access AWS, right, that is through public cloud like google.com or any website that you try to access is public domain. That means whenever you click, the your request travels through public domain like a phone. Whenever you call somebody, that is a public domain. Your audio gets transmitted in a public domain where it's exposed to everybody, and people wanted to hack, they can, if they are very good enough, they have all the security measures and all this stuff, but still people can hack. That is the reason when you're trying to do WhatsApp, they say it's all encrypted because people can look at your content as well. So people, there are many ways of doing that. So that is a public transit that you use to access any of the AWS as well. So to have it, they have given a security thing called virtual private cloud where all your applications inside this, if you think this VPC, right, virtual private cloud, VPC. So you'll have your applications S3 and then Athena, whatever the application, all the applications. So if you think this is the entire AWS and you have VPC, okay. Now your Snowflake is also part of AWS, right? This is thing that is AWS. This entire thing is AWS. And this is VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. And this is your Snowflake. Okay. And Snowflake can talk to these S3 buckets. Okay. If it wants to talk to S3 buckets, right, there are two ways. Whenever we create our S3 buckets, what is the security that we have? We made it public. Do you remember that? When we created our S3
Yeah, yeah.
buckets, so we had it public. So whenever you have it public, right, there is no reason of having this VPC cloud. You can directly go and talk to S3, and talking to S3 happens using the browser, and it uses the um, public route while you're talking to him, right? This connection goes via the public part of it. That means like accessing a Google or accessing, because we made this public, right? Whenever you access Google or any website, news websites or anything, it's all public. Everybody can access, right? So your network goes through a public route. The accessing, whenever you go and look at the IP, there's a way that you can see that as well, right? How your network goes. IP traverse. I forgot the name of the command. You can see, and it shows you what hops from which server to which server it went, and then from there how did it reach S3 buckets, you can know. And when you made it public, it goes by a public route, it doesn't do that. And when you have this VPC enabled, you cannot access via public route. You have to configure the AWS in such a way, VPC, virtual private cloud, in such a way that I am trying to call from snowflake, and this is my VPC endpoint. That means there is a point like an IP address for this snowflake. So where have you installed your snowflake? You would have installed your snowflake on North America zone, and for North America zone there is a snowflake endpoint, VPC endpoint, like an IP address to this. If you configure the VPC endpoint for this particular S3 buckets where you have security on top of it, right, or the virtual private cloud part of it, you tell allow this particular endpoint something like allow this IP address so that Snowflake can access the S3 bucket. Are you able to follow me? You're going to configure your S3 buckets in such a way that you are limiting whomever can access the S3 buckets, like setting up a security. That is, you're telling that please allow these IP addresses which can access me. Or if in my list, these are the IP addresses that have been configured, and if a request comes from this particular IP address, then it can be accessed. If not, it's blocked. So that particular setting can be done inside AWS, and it can be done for all the applications which you set it up in a virtual private cloud. Okay, and then whenever you do this virtual private cloud setup, right, there are two securities here. When you do virtual private cloud, or they call it virtual private link, that means whenever you're calling from Snowflake to S3 bucket, it doesn't use the public route, it uses Amazon's route. Meaning you are in a company and there are two departments. Your data is lying in one particular place, and you have in meaning there are two different servers, and whenever you are trying to access the data from one particular location to the other particular database, it uses internal network. It is inside the your office. Similarly, when you set up virtual private link, the network goes inside. It uses Amazon's network. Think Amazon is entire company, right? So it doesn't go through a public route. It uses internally its route of accessing the data, so which cannot be exposed to a outer world. So it uses its own Amazon's network to do the data. Something like we have done that before. So we had especially for our company, I was working in Cisco, right? We They had a discussion with Amazon, and then Amazon had an um, physical server location in my company, and they had a direct link with my company. That means it doesn't go through a other route, a public route. There is a direct route. So my company can access directly to Amazon, and then they can get the data. So much more secure. Similarly, when you set up the virtual private link, right, it uses Amazon's network. It doesn't use the public network. You are much more safer. That is called virtual private link. Am I able to make some sense, guys? Is too much for you?
Yeah, Shekhar, I have one doubt here.
Sure.
Accessing the public S3, then we should have internet connection, right? For accessing AWS VPC, we don't need the internet connection.
That's what they say, but I don't think you should need internet. How do you access that? This,
Yeah,
let me hold
that's
on
what
for
internal
hold on one
means.
second.
We'll be going with
One,
intranet or internet. That's what I want to know.
intranet only. One second. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry guys, I got an important call I have to take. Now, okay. Sorry, go ahead. What was the question again, Vikram? So whenever you're trying to talk between this one,
Uh,
right? You don't need an internet. That is via internet. Both of them can speak when you enable the virtual private link.
oh, okay, okay, good. And we can
But
also see how it is traversing, right? Connecting to this VPC.
in when it is inside the VPC, right? You cannot. We have the security features of AWS. You cannot see that, but they can guarantee you that is internet.
Okay, okay, thank you.
But how do you initiate that particular thing whenever you want to do that? If you already have a scheduled program, that is an internet. You don't need to worry about it. But if you want to manually initiate something, trying to read, trying to access, then you need internet.
Okay,
Are you able to follow me?
yeah,
You
but
are trying to load. You are trying to load data from S3 buckets into your Snowflake, and you have set up a private link. That means that, and you have scheduled a job. If you have scheduled a job, you don't need an internet. It's internet. It's inside Amazon. It goes and gets the data and gets loaded and everything. You don't need an internet. But if you have to go and load the data
okay.
manually,
Mhm.
even though if they're talking internet, how do you initiate? You have to use a copy command to load the data, right? And that particular initiation of copy command needs an internet.
Yeah, but in that case, no, since it is internet, somebody can see what is happening, right? From
No,
publicly.
if it's a virtual private link that you have established, you cannot see. That means you can initiate it, but you
Even though
cannot
we are in
see.
the internet, but still they can't see.
Sorry,
Okay.
come again.
Even though we have connected through internet for
Internet,
manually
there is
doing that,
no.
but it
Yes,
won't
yes.
be exposed.
Yeah, it won't be exposed. You use internet to initiate a transaction. You try to copy data from your S3 buckets to your Snowflake account, and the moment you initiate a copy command, you would have already created a stage, and the stage is nothing but a link between two things using you. So it uses intranet to read the S3 bucket data and load into your table.
Okay, okay, thank you, Shekhar.
If we do right now, we are accessing public S3 buckets. It uses a public cloud. There is no VPC setup or
Yes.
virtual private link support. Are we clear, girls?
Yeah, I'm clear, Shekhar. Thank you.
So this is the browser, right? Now this is the browser. Okay. Browser is too much to write. I'll say Chrome. Okay. You say you're trying to access S3 buckets, and there is URL you can directly access it, http://s3. If it is public, that can be accessed from anywhere. So now you are connected to SF here, Snowflake, and then you created a stage using a role, and you are accessing AWS S3 buckets, S3. So whenever it goes from here to S3, even though both of them are APS, it uses public route, the network traverse. Okay, it's not. You need an internet connection to access these S3 buckets. Okay. So, setting up of virtual private cloud is the job of an AWS admin. Setting up of virtual private link is a job of AWS admin. You don't have to worry about it. But whenever somebody asks you, okay, how do you do that? So that means you are already having 2.5 years of experience on Snowflake, and you are talking to your you joined a job, corporate environment, you are talking to your AWS admin, and he might ask you some questions, right? And you should not be white faced. You should be able to talk to them and explain them. So that is the reason I have explained you little bit more on virtual private link or virtual private cloud. So to show you that, right? So this is one of the guy who has learned Snowflake from me, and I do what do you call it? Whomever has learned from me, right? And who are senior, who have knowledge about AWS and who have knowledge about Teradata. I have lot many people. I have trained so far about 80 to 100 people. And then if you get onto a job, right? And if they want any job support for a couple of months, because initially you might be little difficult. And then if any of my students ask me, right? I'll connect them to somebody who has already learned from me and working on Snowflake for more than 1 year or 2 years. There are people, about 20 to 30 people who are good enough. They learn from me and they're working in Snowflake. So I connect them, and then I don't have any commercial interest in that. Whomever wants to support, they both talk to each other, but I facilitate them. And for you, if you're trying in the open world and try to take support from somebody else, right? Then you pay them, and if they don't do it, you are at dilemma or you are at loss. But I do this as an extra thing because maybe this is ethical, non-ethical, I don't know. At the end of the day, you guys are learning from me, and I want to help you out. That is the main story. So, and when you're trying to have, you should have at least 2.5 years of experience so that you can market yourself. Or if you are already working on Snowflake, that is a different story. Once you get onto the job, right, you have to survive. And you are senior folks and you know how to survive, but initially you need some help to survive. So I normally connect to people who wants to earn an extra income, and if you are okay because you're gonna get at least um, 60% hike. So my average for all the people who have learned from me, right? The average hike they got is 63%. And I help you out if you are trying to get into a job. Talk to me. I'll help you to get the best hike. How to do that, and all. I have tips and tricks that I can help you out. And if they give you 30%, right, I'll make sure that you get at least 50%. I can help you on those areas. So I connect these people, and then they talk to each other so that the guy who has learned from me is benefited, and the guy who has learned very new, who is want to survive, they can also get benefited. I don't have any commercial interest. The only interest that I have is, right, you might refer two more guys that Shaker is teaching very good. His teaching is very good. He goes in detail, this kind of stuff. So I have 10 people, and you give me two more people. That is good enough for me to earn my income. But the other thing is, right, I can make use of the use cases like this. If you look at this, right, this is the use case that he wanted to resolve in his company. He is the only Snowflake guy in the entire company, and now he is not an architect. He was taken as a Snowflake guy as a lead. And once there is only single guy, right, all the questions are directed towards him. You have to act like an architect, and if you have a team by itself, then that is a different story. And then when your people are asking you questions, right, you have to answer them. And this is what happened. They are trying to set up Snowflake, and they asked him private link setup. or private link VPC in the shared account. How do we do that? And then KMS key setup. How do we do that? And then what is the account role that you have to have KMS setup? Guys, can you see the screen, right?
Yes, Shekhar.
So these are all the questions that the AWS admin asked this guy, and I have somebody who is supporting him, and he is also good in AWS up to certain extent. He is very strong in Snowflake. He is from an Oracle background. So I have all kinds of people who has Teradata background, who has AWS background, who has data stage background. So normally if your project is with the Teradata migration, right, I can connect you to somebody who has Teradata, and that becomes easier for you to, he knows the Teradata. And this is AWS, right? So he did not tell us he wanted only pure Snowflake, and then I have somebody who's a 17-year Oracle architect, EBS, and all this stuff. And then I gave it to him. They were talking, and then they asked him all these questions. That guy is also good in AWS, but not as good as an AWS admin. And then he collected all the evidence. So when you get these kind of questions, right, the biggest problem is you have to understand the requirement, and that needs to be translated to somebody who can help you out. If somebody wants to understand the requirement and help you, that becomes a very big challenge. So that is the reason I am putting my extra effort to tell you what is a VPC, what is this one, and I have slides that how do you do that and all this stuff. Okay, even though it's on AWS, you should have the content and the knowledge on it, so that it becomes easier for you to understand the requirement, and you can translate to somebody, you can ask somebody, you can search in Google, you can go browse this, explore, and then try to resolve the issue. Okay, are you able to follow me?
Yes, sir.
And then that guy reported how to set up and all this stuff, and he had more he didn't have. So, and one more thing that I do, right, if the other folks have any challenges between them, they cannot resolve, it's a very complex issue, they call me, and then I help them out, and then I send, this is all sent by me, how do you do that and all this stuff. But I don't have any commercial interest in this. Just make sure that both of them are happy, and I get two more people for training. That's it. And I can show these use cases to somebody else, right? Now I am able to show something for you guys, and then you are able to understand what it is. So I get these use cases basically. Okay. So this is what AWS. So, and people might ask you, have you set up any private link? And can you tell me? Because whenever people ask you a question, right, they expect that you know a little bit of AWS as well. So now you know what's your private link, and they might ask you, yeah, I haven't done that. We had a AWS guy, and we have given our AWS VPC endpoint to him, and then he configured it. Okay, are you able to follow me, guys?
Yes, Shekhar.
Okay. So what is a AWS private link? Virtual private cloud is different. Private link is different. Virtual private cloud is you are trying to have all your applications inside a virtual network, so that you can set up the IP addresses which can access what is done. That is an that is a thing that you configure, and that is entirely done by Snowflake admins. Virtual private link is you are trying to, for those virtual private cloud environments, right? Creating private VPC endpoint that allow direct, secure connectivity between AWS VPCs without allowing AWS virtual private clouds without traversing the public internet. Reason is Snowflake is implemented as a virtual private cloud. So when you have two clouds, if you want to talk to each other, then you have to. There is a way that the mechanism is through AWS private link, which traverses using Amazon network, not the public network. This helps private link enables creating a highly secure network between Snowflake and your other AWS VPCs in the same region. If you are trying to set up in this, when you're talking to each other, it can be done in the same region. If you want to talk to any other regions, then you have to get permission from Snowflake. And if you have two accounts in AWS, forget about AWS, and one account needs to talk to another account in a different region, still you have to talk to AWS and get the permissions. The same thing is the same layer is now you'll be talking to Snowflake. In turn, Snowflake goes and gets the permission for you to talk to any other region. Is protected by unauthorized external access. So, are you clear now? What is an AWS private link? And AWS private link can be enabled using price. And if you look at it, right, AWS private link support can done only through business critical edition. If you have chosen a standard edition, enterprise edition, you cannot have the AWS private link. Okay, you have to remember. That is the reason most of the companies go for business critical edition, because when you have your entire ecosystem in AWS, and if you want to talk to each other, then they'll go with business critical edition, so that they can enable the AWS private link on top of it, much more secure. If you are more worried about the security part of it, then you have to go with the business critical part of it. So my production environment is in business critical, and my dev and stage or QA are in enterprise. So normally people do dev in standard, QA in enterprise, and then production business critical. It depends how rich the company is, how they want to do it. It's all in different use cases. Okay. So setting up the private link can take up to 2 days. So whenever you're trying to set up the private link, right, and you have to provide the account ID for each AWS VPC you wish to connect directly to Snowflake. So you have to give the, if you have more than one account, if you want to connect and all this stuff. Providing incorrect or incomplete information may delay the process. So this setup takes a couple of days, and you don't need to worry about it. Your AWS admin will take care of all this stuff. So whenever you're trying to set up the AWS VPC account IDs, if that means you are trying to talk from Snowflake to an S3 buckets, which is part of the VPC, right? You have to talk to Snowflake and give them all the details of the VPC, which particular virtual private cloud that you are going to talk, the account ID of that particular ID, which they give you a 12-digit string provided by AWS. So you have to talk to Snowflake, as well as you have to your admin knows how to talk to AWS part of it. Snowflake provides a VPC endpoint address for all your region. So com.amazon.aws.vpc dot the region. Now I have signed up APAC South 1. So you can use APAC South 1 dot hyphen svc dot. It gives you all the details of that particular thing. So this particular URL or com dot, this is like a IP address for it. If you give this to your AWS admin guy and tell them this is the VPC endpoint, then he goes and then uses it for configuring the private link. If you want to have your VPC endpoint, where that means VPC endpoint normally depends upon the region in which you have created your Snowflake account. So if you talk to Snowflake support, they'll give you the details as well. Okay. So this is pretty much about the private link part of it. Okay. So now let's go to AWS console and then see how we can do the storage integration part. I cannot show you, I cannot tell you, I have given you enough information that you can explore or talk to the I cannot my tell you how to set up the virtual private link. That is not part of this course, because on a trial account that you cannot do, and I don't have the system or the ecosystem where I have enabled a virtual private cloud in the AWS, or I don't have these. So that is the reason. And when you're trying to access these kind of things, that is the reason I made this public, so that you can do the exercises. Okay. The S3 account that we have built, created, I made it as a public, so that it's pretty much easier for you to access from any part of the world. Because your focus is on to read the S3 buckets, load into Snowflake. You have many things to do. Your focus is not on how do you set up the virtual private link, how do you set up the virtual private cloud. That is none of our business as a Snowflake guy, but you should know what it is. So that is the reason I have spent more than 1 hour for you to make sure that you can understand that. Okay, log back in. A286B2. Oh, my account has been suspended. Oh shit. I think it's more than they give it to you for in a year. I think it's more than a year, and then it's a surprise to me. Oh my god. It takes some time for me to set up. Yeah. Anyway, this particular thing is almost similar to the role. I'll explain you. There is only one external step that you need to do, and we should be good enough to access that. Okay. Oh my god. Okay. So when you're trying to set up the Snow S3 configuration, right, by integration object, we are now talking about this particular thing, configuring a Snowflake storage integration. Okay. Create S3 bucket. We have done that. Access permissions on the S3 bucket. I'm going to show you. We made it public for easy access. Snowflake related AWS IAM role creation. You have to create a IAM role. This is also we have done that. We have created a policy. We have done. So I'm going to give you all the steps here. Creation of Snowflake cloud integration. This is nothing but you have to issue a SQL statement to create a integration object. I'll show you how it is. So step 4, AWS IAM user for your Snowflake account updation with Snowflake integration. This can be done. Granting IAM user. So this is all we have done. The only thing is, while creating an external stage, you will have a storage integration object. Let me show you. I have all the screens also with me. So what is storage integration? You have a S3 buckets. You will create a storage integration object, and then by using an external stage, which helps you to interact with your S3 bucket through an IAM user. External stage object is 2, 3. Snowflake created AWS IAM user uses the S3 bucket to access that. Okay. AWS services, go to IAM, create policy. This is what we have done before, and this is JSON, and we are trying to give the permissions on the S3 bucket that what we have created, and then this is another thing called bucket policy. So this is the policy that you create for on what are the permissions that you want to give on the S3 buckets, and here this is the access policy. So whenever you're trying to create a bucket policy, and if the S3 bucket is not public, and you want to set up from which particular location you are trying to access this S3 bucket, you have to set up a bucket policy. And when you go and when you created a bucket, right, there is a bucket policy. This bucket policy you create on S3 buckets. The policy that we have created, this is from IAM module. In the IAM module, you have gone and then created a policy selecting your S3 buckets. This policy is the bucket policy. When you create an S3, you go into S3 module and then create a bucket, right? And there itself in the properties, you have a policy. And there you can set up this allow S3 and what are all the buckets that you want to. S3 bucket 1, bucket 2, if you have more than one buckets, you can use that. And here, AWS source VPC. And this is what we are talking about, right? com.amazon.vpce.ap southeast 1. This is the Singapore region. When I prepared my slide deck, I had my account in Singapore region because that was the nearest one. Amazon India, APAC India was not there. So this is done, and then VPC, and this is the VPC endpoint that we are talking about. I am giving access so that somebody from this particular endpoint can access this S3 bucket. That's it, plain and simple. That is the bucket policy. This policy you create in IAM. This policy you create in S3. So if you are not making it as a public, your S3 bucket, and you know from this particular VPC endpoint you are trying to read your S3 buckets, then you can configure your S3 bucket like this. Guys, are you able to follow me?
Yes, Shekhar.
Yes, I need yeah from everybody, guys. Please, if you have any questions, you can stop me right now and you can ask me. I know this is too much information for you because you are
Yeah.
not from the background, and if you are from AWS, you guys should be cool. If you're not from this AWS background, right, it becomes a little clumsy for you to digest the whole thing in single bit. But most of this is for your knowledge only. You're not going to do anything. You will be focusing on Snowflake. You're trying to load the data, create the stage, and all this stuff. But if you want to interact with somebody, because you're all senior folks, right? And then you might get into a scenario where I've shown you a WhatsApp picture where, and he was working for a banking client. He cannot share his laptop. He has to take a picture and then send it to them. Banking and information insurance sectors, they have a very strict rules. They have their virtual desktops or strict environments where you cannot interact with anybody. So that is another challenge as well. Okay, so this is a bucket policy that normally if you don't make your bucket S3 bucket as public, but you want to access, right? Then you have to give the S3 endpoint to access. You have to know what is your endpoint. Okay. So forget about all this stuff. Just create a public bucket and do your Snowflake activity that is good enough for you. And this, I'm trying to create a role, and then we have done create a role. And then when you are trying to create a role, we have used another AWS account. So that is the reason, right? Snowflake is another AWS account. We are trying to, it's not an application. S3 is an application, Athena is an application. We have many applications inside Snowflake. But this particular thing is we are trying to give role to another account, which is also part of AWS. So you should have the account ID. and then the external ID. So account ID, we are giving it as dummy. The same account ID that you are trying to access, use that, and external ID is dummy. Okay. Now you have to once the role is created, right? You have to create an object called storage integration object, and something like create table name, create storage integration name, and storage integration can be accessible by account admin only. Account admin, is the super user, and he only can create a snowflake storage integration. And if you want any other users to create storage integration, you have to grant that particular role. Grant create integration on account. On account is a global privilege. Create a table, create a view. These are all local privileges. When you want to create a database, when you want to create a storage integration, that means your entire account will depend upon it, right? So that is called a global. And when global privileges, we'll talk in detail later, is a on account to roles sysadmin. So normally whenever you log into your trial account, you'll be using the sysadmin, right? So you cannot create unless until the sysadmin has this particular privilege. That is the reason I have given this. Use role sysadmin, and now I'm trying to create storage integration object. Create storage integration S3 snowflake integration. Type is equal to external stage. Storage provider is equal to S3. It can be Azure Blobs. It can be Google Storage. Using this particular thing, storage provide, you can access. For example, you have your AWS, and now you want to access data from Azure Blob. You just give Azure Blobs here. And if you're trying to access from Google Storage, you can do it. I'll show you an example, but not as part of the curriculum. I'll take some weekend to finish an extra things that you need to work in a work environment. I'll show you this example. How do you connect to your Azure from your AWS account only. But you have to sign up for an Azure account as well. As if you are now signing up for a AWS account, right? You have to have an Azure account as well, and you can interact. I'll show you that little later. But this is where this using the storage integration. So this is another important interview question. People ask you what is the difference between storage integration or accessing by user or accessing by role. Storage integration helps you to connect to other providers as well. Got it? So you can talk to other providers and somebody, Srihari, I think you were asking me, right? How do I get the data from a different thing? So you create the integration in AWS
Yes.
and give the details of the Azure blobs or the Google storage, which you will be able to get the data. And enable true AWS role ARN. This is the role. Once you created a role, right, you have the account resource number. You get, and here storage allowed locations. This is your S3 buckets URL. You create this integration and then describe storage integration, whatever it is. Now, when you look at this picture, right, you have created this integration object. Okay, and then you have to create. Let's go back. I'll show you. Create stage, my S3 stage, storage integration, so and so integration, URL, file format. Previously, when we are trying to create stage, right, we are creating the stage based on the user or based on the role. Here we are creating the stage based on the storage integration. So if your storage integration is talking to Azure blobs, you will have this stage which reads from Azure blobs. If it's Google storage, it whenever say list at the rate of stage, then it shows you the data from the Azure blob, it shows the data from the Google storage. Now we are using S3, it shows the data from the S3 bucket. Are we clear? So this is by role, right? Only by role. We try to do this in the second part. First part is by role, and here we are using S3 integration. Here just role. I just had this statement here so that you can compare. And whenever you're trying to do that, right, there is AWS SSE KMS encryption. KMS key ID AW/key. That means whenever you're trying to encrypt some data. So there is another thing module in AWS called um, key management system. That is separate application in AWS. You'll have something called Azure Vault in Azure as well, and Google has something similar to that. So whenever you're trying to generate the keys, right, the keys needs to be generated. There are some security criteria. You can generate the keys using 128-bit, 256-bit keys. That's much more. So whenever you generate the key, right, you can store the key in your KMS, key management system, and that is like a service that they provide you. And using that key, because if the key is lost, the data that you have encrypted is gone. You have to make sure that you have the proper key, and then the key is stored properly so that you can access that. The access to the key should be given to two people. There are a lot of other things when you are into security part of it, you will get to know. But here there is a separate application where you can have a key, and using that key you can encrypt the entire files that are in your S3 buckets to make it much more secure, so that people cannot hack it. Even they hack it, they cannot read it. Okay, so you have your files encrypted in AWS S3 buckets, and if you're trying to load the data into Snowflake, how can Snowflake understand that? Because it's encrypted, it's not a plain CSV file, right? It's not a plain English. You are encrypted, you will have all the gibberish inside that particular file when you open and try to read the file. Snowflake cannot load that data. So whenever you are trying to create a stage, you have to give the key that you have encrypted, so that using that key, Snowflake decrypts it and then loads the data, and then it encrypts again. Whatever the data that is in your table is also encrypted. That is called Snowflake encryption at rest. We have talked about it. But the data that you store in table is also encrypted. But the encryption that you have, you have manually encrypted your files in your S3 buckets, and when you're trying to load it, you have to give the encryption key so that Snowflake can decrypt it and load it and encrypt again. That is the reason we have the key, and the key can be in AWS KMS. And if you give the key ID, right, automatically Snowflake understands, because Snowflake is also on AWS. It goes and tries to connect to the key management system and get the key, and then do the decryption part of it. Are we clear, guys? So that was the second question in my WhatsApp image that I showed you, right? Is there key KMS to be implemented? How to do that and all this stuff? Are we good?
Yes, sir.
Lost your voice, sir.
Hello.
Hello, Shekhar. Hello, Shekhar. We are not hearing your voice. Yeah, anybody can hear me?
I think
Yes.
he said actually power loss.
Yeah, yeah. Wait for 2 minutes.
Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, no.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, one more request, guys. This is the protocol. Whenever I lose power, my generator comes up. Until then, so bear with me for 1 or 2 minutes. I don't. I do have this UPS for my router, but it's not working somehow. So whenever I lose the power, it takes 1 or 2 minutes. And I normally post in the WhatsApp group where we are all right. I'll update there so that you check that in case if my voice is lost. Okay. So coming back, so that is the KMS part of it. So and if the files are encrypted, talk to your admin, and he'll give you the encryption keys. Where is this location? Everything when you're trying to create your stage. Okay. So this is the configuring the AWS IAM role. So S3 bucket, IAM policy, and then the policy is attached to your role, and you have trust relationships and IAM user. So this is all the permissions that we have seen, right? Get object, list object, put, and all this stuff. So configuring is IAM role. You have given this IAM policy where you can go and attach the. I have given the text files with the clear what do you call the steps of how do you do that. Okay, and then these are all the things. How do you create the IAM role? There is a role to other account. So using the dummy account and then the external ID is all part of it. Okay, create an external stage. Okay, and configuring your IAM role. Once the role is created, right, you'll get the describe the stage, and from there you go and edit the relationships and modify the snowflake account ID, IAM account ID, and external ID, right? That is this particular thing. So you can use the data into you can unload the data basically. That's what it is. Unloading the table once that is done, right? So unloading the data into external stage. Copy into from my customer storage integration and file format. Generating single multiple files yields a single is equal to true, single is equal to false. Validating unloading data again use validation mode is greater than loss. This we have already spoken in our what do you call data ingestion part of it. The only difference is right, you will create a storage integration object. So this is only the create storage integration, S3 integration, and use this to create your stage. That is the only difference. This helps you to talk to other providers as well. That is the advantage of storage integration. Are we good? I wanted to finish this in 15 minutes. First 15 minutes, I want to finish this remaining topic, and then I wanted to get on to the next topic, database objects and all this stuff. But This is how. So I'm little passionate, and then I wanted to make sure you guys should be comfortable when you start working, right? So I have given you enough information about this. Okay, this is pretty much. Any questions so far, guys? Before moving on to next topic.
Yes, I'm
So,
good.
Okay. So shall we move on to the next topic then? So you, unless until you do the exercise, right? You cannot. It think whenever you listen, it looks everything good, but you start doing, then only you'll get. Whenever you get into action, then only you'll learn more stuff. You have to go create a AWS account, try to play around, create this, come back. The step, the S3 bucket, the files that I have, right? I'll that gives you the clear. I've already shared all of them, right? How do you create S3 buckets? The text files that I've shown you, I've shared
no,
them, right?
Shekhar, we didn't receive anything.
Oh my God, sure. You should have at
They
least
gave
asked me.
only first or second lab those things only they gave 3 times.
But you have to ask me, Bhaskar, if that is the case. Now, Sindhu is not anymore. We are relation. We are talking to each other. I'm talking to you, and you need to talk to me. If you have any questions, ping me. WhatsApp group, everything is there. My phone number is
Okay.
there in the WhatsApp group. Now, DVS is only a facilitator. If you want anything, I am there. I am talking to you. You know me. I know you guys. And somebody asks a question, I can identify your voice and then answering based on your name as well now. So please, if you're stuck anywhere, if you're trying to do something, don't wait. I would have asked Sindhu, and Sindhu would have asked me as well.
Okay.
So I'm going to send you all this stuff right away after the class. Don't worry, okay? So you have seen this. Oops, no, this Notepad plus plus. No, see, yes, integration creation. I have given all the clear steps. Created a subfolder in S3 bucket, uploaded a file, create a policy to grant access is the one, and then create a role for another AWS account. This is the role thing. And here I have given the create a bucket policy. I have given an example of it. And in the bucket, if you want to access a particular path, you can give. If not, star should be good enough. And VPC endpoint string equals this VPC endpoint, whatever the region. If you haven't created your S3 bucket as public, then this is the way that you have to do it. But go ahead and do it as public. Don't waste your time. This you don't know the VPC endpoint. I can give you the VPC endpoint that's there in Snowflake documentation. You can check what is the endpoint for your account. But this particular thing, if you want to do it, if you have some time, you can go ahead and do it. So I have given the bucket policy here as well, and use role account admin, create Snowflake integration. This is in the account admin. If not, I have shown you in the slide deck, right? Because normally you log into Snowflake as sysadmin, and sysadmin should have the privilege of integration, creating the integration. Grant, you have to log into account admin, and then grant create integration on account to sysadmin, and then you have to do this particular thing if you're doing in sysadmin. If not, you cannot create that. This is the role, and this is the S3 bucket URL. Describe the Snowflake integration, and then you'll get the AWS IAM and then external ID. Copy the storage AWS, and then the storage external. I have given the exact things. You get them, copy them into the trusted relationship, and update them. Here create stage, my S3 stage, storage integration, URL. Okay, and then list at the rate of whatever you want. Okay, this is the storage integration. Now I've given you all the steps, which makes you much more easier for you to do this exercise. And I'm going to share all this stuff for you. Okay.
And the Python learning, you told right some topics. Those also we didn't receive.
Okay. Hold on 1 second, guys. Guys, give me 2 minutes. 2 minutes, please. Hello. Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, Shekhar.
Sorry, my wife was going for a vaccination, so I have to cut you off, guys, for a couple of minutes. Sorry about that. So let
Sir, I have a doubt, sir. Sir,
yes,
uh, first we have actually created IAM access role, right? That's the first thing we will access S3 bucket. So during that time, we created role and policy. We can use the same roles and policy in storage integration also, or we need to create a separate roles and policy
no, you
for
can use the
storage
same role.
integration.
No, you can use the same role.
Okay, okay,
You
thank
don't
you,
need
sir.
to create another role, but you have to create a storage integration object.
Yeah, yes, that's the additional thing. Okay, sir. Yeah.
Yes, that is the additional thing. So let me go ahead and send you the files right away. Okay, in the meantime. Yeah, that AWS part of it also, Bhaskar, I'm going to send it to you. Don't worry. The Python part of it, right? Hold on.
Okay.
I don't see. Hold on one sec. WKND. WKND.
Here is sir. I got all the documents from Sunita, but I
Mm-hmm.
haven't received as part of this weekend.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm going to send you right now. Okay, hold on. Yeah, there is the storage integration. I'll say yes, 3 by role. By user. User role creation, and then that's it, right? PPT. Yes, you guys are all paid the fees, right? Because normally I cannot do this unless until you have paid your fees. That's what the devious policy is. But I'm still doing it. If you haven't paid, please take care of that. Okay. I'm just trying to send you the document. Normally I have to send it to Sindhu, and then she normally shares to somebody who has done all the payments. So if you haven't done that right, I'm just doing it here. Please do take care of the fee payment. And you guys are very economical. 16K is the fees that DVS charges. When I do my training outside, I train 20K. Sorry, 25K for my personal thing, and DVS 16 to 20K. It depends. If you are a previous student, they'll give you a discount of 3 to 4K. If you are a new guy, they'll charge you 20K. So I want you to take care of that particular thing as well. And then, and see here, you're part of this group right now. Are you getting all this WhatsApp details?
Yeah, I'm part of this group. I'm getting it, sir. Yes. Even the
Okay,
videos also I'm started getting it. Yeah. Thank you. And
okay.
also paid the fees as well. Thank you.
No, no, I don't want. So it's an embarrassing thing. I don't want to say, but whenever I share this, right
Yeah, yeah,
now, devious folks normally ask me to avoid to do that, but I'm just giving you all the details, thinking that you already taken care of the fees. Python topics to learn as well. Okay, I have so I've shared you all the documents, and I'm gonna share you today's other topic that we're gonna have. Where are we? Hmm? Snowflake objects. This should bring us. Okay, so let's get back to our stuff. Now we have done our data ingestion part of it, where we have loaded the data from on-prem to cloud, structured data and semi-structured data to cloud, and then cloud to cloud using AWS S3 buckets integration and all this stuff, right? So that particular thing. Now let's get back into the Snowflake objects. What kind of objects are there? What are tables? How kinds of tables, views, materialized views, and all this stuff. And these things are you are much more familiar. The AWS arena area is kind of little not new to you, right? It's a new thing if you're not part of a cloud or anything. And these things are pretty much, and it's all pretty much easy. So only the complex part that you're going to learn is JSON, semi-structured data. Everything is rather configuration or understanding. Basically, it's much more easier. Okay. So when we talk about Snowflake objects, right, there are different kinds of things. So basic stuff with the tables, and we have different kinds of tables. And tables plays an important role in anywhere, but in Snowflake it's much more important because you store your data and you have to pay for the storage, and you have to be very careful what to store, what not to store, what kind of table that you have to store. So there are some more features of these tables that helps you to identify, because there is no backup needed for Snowflake. So why don't we need any backup for the Snowflake? Any clue? Where does your data get stored in whenever you create a table and do the data loading into a table, right? Where does the data get stored?
S3.
And what are the features of S3? We have seen the S3 features, right? We have the S3 storage. What do you call it? Uh,
Lifestyle.
Life cycle, not the life cycle, the other one, right?
Okay.
The standard access, infrequent access, storage qualifier, or what do you call? What I forgot the name of it. Storage class. What kind of storage class that you use? Durability, availability. We have seen it, right? 99.11 nines of availability, durability. Sorry, and 99.99 percentage of availability. Have I've shown you the AWS S3 part of it, characteristics of it, right? Do you remember that? Yes, no.
Yes, sir, we
Great.
remember.
Yeah. So where is this S3 AWS? AWS S3 PPT, right? Object durability 99.99%, 11 nines. Availability 99.99. So if you have standard default all purpose storage when usage is unknown, 99.119% durability and 4 nines availability, replicated in 3 plus availability zones, no minimum object size or retrieval fees. So Snowflake normally goes for the standard, and your data is replicated into 3 different places. If your database is there, you'll have 3 copies of the data. If one is gone down, you'll have the other 2 places. And so AWS guarantees this percentage, 99.9911 that means 10,000 files stored in S3, then you can expect to lose one file in 10 million years. If you have this kind of setup of your tables, right, do you really need a backup again? That is the reason Snowflake has chosen the blob storages. Blob storages have these properties which are much more comfortable, secure. You won't have the chance of losing your data. So you don't have the chance of, what do you call it, losing your objects. Crashing the database doesn't do anything. Your objects are intact. Your data is intact. Are you able to follow me, guys? So
Yeah, yes,
whenever you
okay.
create Yeah, so whenever you create a table or create a database or do anything, it's all part of S3, and your files are durability, availability, you don't lose any data and all this stuff. So what if a crash occurs, your Snowflake goes down, your AWS goes down? There are different scenarios. We'll talk about them as well. Okay. So when it comes to tables, right? You can create a permanent table, you can create a temporary table, you can create a transient table. Okay. Temporary tables are like temporary, um, what do you call, we have created temporary stages, you remember that, right? We create a stage and we have loaded our files into temporary stage, and once you log out of that particular session, the stage is gone, right? Similarly, you have a temporary table, you can create a temporary table that holds good for the entire session, but whenever you load the data into temporary table also, that adds to the storage. So if you keep the data for 24 hours, that adds to the average storage of your database. Okay. So you can have a temporary table, name of the temporary table that of a permanent table as well. For example, you have orders data, and you can create a temporary table orders again. And the temporary table orders will have the precedence. That means whenever in the same schema, when you have a permanent table, you can create a temporary table as well. I'm gonna show you the examples of it. Hold on. So that's only temporary. You can use it for temporary purpose. And these temporary tables help you to load intermediate data into temporary tables, and you can use that table for when you have trying to get too much data into multiple tables and all this stuff, right? This helps you. It's again depends upon your business use case, and this is only temporary. You can temporarily store your data somewhere and then utilize it, and then basically for transformation purpose or processing purpose, you can use temp tables and then create the table and load the table, use that particular thing. So the other advantage is, right, for example, you have an employee table and you have created a temporary table called EMP. Okay. And you can refer this particular table as if you are referring a permanent table. So you have loaded some data into, for example, you have a big query that refers your permanent table, but the permanent table has millions of records, but you want only a subset of the data to be processed. For example, you want to process only department number 10 data, but you cannot have the filter whenever you use a big table. That's a huge data that you have to scan. The performance issues also as well, right? So you can create a temporary table out of your main table and have only subset of data, and then you can run your queries as if you're running on the main table. That is the advantage of temporary table. First thing, you can use it as temporary, and as soon as you log out of the session, that's gone. Storage is only for the time that you have stored. You don't need to worry about the data that is stored in the temporary table. Once your session is done, or if it's more than 24 hours, the temporary table is gone. Okay, you can use it for intermediate purposes for your business case. But the other advantage is, right, you can create the table as of a main table, and then you can use them. Are you able to follow me, guys? Show
Yes.
tables like, I'll say I have employee table here. Okay, create or replace temporary table emp as select star from emp where if I say select star from emp, right, which table am I referring to now? I can just create a temporary table and use it. But the main advantage of another advantage of having a temp table is, right, you can say temp select star from emp, and you'll see all only 10. Okay, so it references the temporary table first in this section. If there's already temporary table, it refers that. If not, it refers the main table. So if you run your query, if you think that there's huge data set in your main table and you populate some subset in a table, and then if you run your query, right, it refers to the temporary table, and then your query runs pretty fast. Are we good? Drop table emp. So when you say drop table emp table drop, and I am gonna query the same thing. See, I have 45 rows with all different department numbers. Isn't it good?
Okay, it is okay, but how do we identify whether it is temporary or it's a permanent? No, Shekhar, what I'm asking, while selecting also, is there any way we can specify temporary table or
No, you have to remember that.
okay.
So if you look at these show tables like emp, what is it showing? Is it it doesn't even show permanent thing here, because you can only refer to. So this is how you can figure it out. That is the reason I was
Okay.
calmly trying to show you. Show tables like
Okay.
emp. Is it showing the permanent one? Let me drop this table. It
Hmm.
says temporary. Kind is temporary here, right?
Yeah.
So what is it showing? Kind is equal to table. Is it
Yes.
showing temporary? This is the
No.
only way that you can identify.
Okay.
When a temporary table is there, it doesn't even talk about the permanent part of it. Okay. And then transient tables. So this is the best table that you can use to avoid if you are using it for staging purposes, right? You're staging database, you're staging schema, staging table, everything can be transient. There is a very big advantage of it. And people ask you in interviews, what is the transient table? Why is it used for? What is the advantages? Okay, let's talk about it. So transient tables, they are also called TT tables, shortcome in a terminology, because you're already working in Snowflake environment for 2.5 years, right? We can just create a TT table. If somebody talks about it, it's a transient table. Similar to permanent table, but does not have a fail-safe period. Okay, this I have to explain you a little bit. Okay, you can create transient databases, schemas, and visible to any user with appropriate privileges. System failure, TT may be last. And now I have to explain you a little more about what is a failsafe. So now you have created the Snowflake account and you have created the database in it. So whenever you create a table, right? Table can have a time travel on top of it. Time travel is something like you can by default each table when you create it has a duration of 24 hours of time travel. That means it you can go back and then query the data at any point of time for 24. That is the default condition. That means, for example, we have talked about S3 buckets, right? So there is already file in the S3 buckets called emp.csv. Can I upload the same file emp.csv there? There is a file in the stage, internal stage called emp.csv. I am trying to put one more file, the same emp.csv. Can I do that?
No, sir.
Mm.
We have to
Then
override.
we cannot. We should override it.
Why do we have to override it?
Uh, to change the metadata of it,
No. What is the character of S3 buckets? Whenever you trying to create an S3 buckets, can you have the same file
it,
again?
it will have the version of if we have the same file.
Yeah, you
It will
have to
try to
enable
load.
the version. If not, yes, that means that is a blob storage. You can replace a file. You cannot modify a file. So when you want to have the same file again and again, then you have to enable the versions of the file. Something similar. So when you have the versions, right? So whenever you create a table and whenever you do DML activity on the table, Snowflake automatically creates versions of your data. For example, you have employee table and you have 100 records and you updated 20. You will have a V1 with updated 20 records, but you still have V0 and then you have this until 24 hours. All the availability of these versions will there be for you for 24 hours. That is the time travel period. That means using this particular versioning, you can go back to the time and at a particular timestamp, you can query your table so that it will give you the snapshot of that particular timestamp. For example, at 10 o'clock, you have inserted 100 records, and then at 11 o'clock, you modified 50 records. At 12 o'clock, you have modified 25 records. But if you want to see at 10 o'clock what is my data set, you can come back using a timestamp. There is a query. When we talk about time travel, I'll tell you. So you can go and query at 10 o'clock what is your snapshot of your table. That can be done only because you have the v0 version also available for you. So whenever you create a table, by default you will have 24-hour time travel. That means you will have all these versions available for you for 24 hours. You can go back. If somebody drops a table, you can undrop a table 24 hours. You can recover the data as well. Now that is a big topic, separate topic. We'll talk about it, but that is the situation. So that is you can do a time travel. That is, you can have 24-hour by default this one. But for keeping the 24-hour versions, your storage is gonna be increased as well. You have to pay for that. So if you don't want that particular thing also, right, you can say I don't want the data. That's a property called data retention period in number of days. If you set it to 0, they won't even have that. By default it's 24 hours. If you don't want that storage as well, you can keep it to 0 when you create a table, and it don't keep whatever the data that you inserted at any point of time. That is the only thing. When you update, it will have the updated file only. The other files that it has been modified, it discards them immediately. Okay, so that is called time travel. And what snowflake does is, right, if your data retention period is done, that means you set 24 hours default, right? After 24 hours, it moves that file to a particular area called failsafe. It keeps that particular data set for 7 days. So what does that mean? Means if you after the time travel is done, after the 24 hours is done, then it moves those files into a particular location and keeps it for 7 days. So for example,
So it is something like automatic archival. Sorry, sir. Sorry to
yeah, that is true. It's not an archival process. Yeah, it's automatic thing which keeps in a particular the file. For example, your 24 hours is done for a table, and then the latest file after 24 hours it moves to a particular area, and the next 24 hours is done, the latest file will be moved into that particular area. So it keeps that thing for 7 days. The latest file of your thing will be placed in a particular extra as an insurance. And if you lose your data, then you can raise a ticket to snowflake and ask for the data retrieval within that 7 days range. That particular 7 days range is called fail safe, and you cannot recover it. With if it is 24-hour range, you can recover, you can query the data, you can undrop the table, you can do all kinds of stuff. After 24 hours, if you want to access that particular data set, then it will be in the fail safe, and then you have to talk to snowflake to retrieve. If you raise a ticket, they can get you the data from the fail safe, and they can recover the data for you, and they keep this data for 7 days. But you have to pay 7 days of data charges as well. If you have a table which is 100 GB, and you will have to pay 7 days of 100 GB as well. The average normally whenever they do the storage charges, right? The storage charges are based on the average balance. For example, when you have your table average balance of 100 GB, the total charges that you have to pay is 100 plus 7 days. 107 days is the total average that they calculate. Because in the fail safe also they are going to keep your data, right? And storing the data means you have to pay for it. The total average charges that you will be paying is normally you can keep this for 90 days. That is the maximum. In the snowflake you can have for 90 days the time travel, right? I said 24 days, right? That you can have it for 90 days and 7 days of fail safe. So total 97 days. If you created a table today, and then by tomorrow you will have 24 hours, and after that, so it will keep on. If your table, you can specify a parameter telling that my data retention time is 1 day. By default is 1 day. If you say 30 days, it will keep 30 days of versions of the files for you for availability. and for those 30 versions of files you are paying for the storage. And for transient tables there is no failsafe. If your Amazon crashes or if your database crashes, if you have created a regular table, and by default all regular tables have a fail-safe zone, and Snowflake recovers the entire dataset from the fail-safe and makes you data ready. This is the disaster management that Snowflake gives you, so that you don't lose any transactions. It will keep another set of data somewhere else, and then it recovers from that particular thing. It recreates your account. It recovers your entire account with databases and everything and gives it to you from the failsafe. So when you create a normal table, you will have failsafe, you have data retention period and all this stuff. In transient tables you won't have failsafe. The 7 days of data that you are trying to pay won't be there, but the that is the advantage of it, pro of it. The con of it, negative of it, if Snowflake goes down or AWS goes down, you cannot recover the transient table or transient schema or a transient database. All the permanent can be recovered. Okay. So for all the staging purposes, you are trying to get a staging schema, you get your data into staging and then trying to process and put it into your target table. We create transient databases, transient schemas, transient tables, so that we don't have the additional burden of 7 days. And in the staging table, if you are trying to get millions of records trying to process, right, then you won't have the 7 days of failsafe. You can save the storage. That is what transient tables is. They are like a permanent table, as good as a permanent table. You can grant privileges on the table to somebody else. Temporary table you cannot grant privileges, it's only to you, only to your session. But transient tables works like a regular table. You can grant privileges, you can do all this stuff whenever it doesn't have the failsafe. That means the 7 days of storage won't be there for you, and if the system failure, you cannot recover that particular data. So whenever you're talking about staging, that means you already have a source where you can get it again, right? So we don't need that. Where system failure also, we don't worry about the transient tables. So that is another thing. How do you create transient table? How do you create? How did we create temporary table? Create or replace temporary table, table name. Create or replace transient table, table name. That's it. Okay. I'll show you one slide and we can call it a day because too much stuff for you. So this is the temporary table, remainder of the session. And you can have time travel, 0 or 1. By default is 1 day. Even in temporary table, if the table can stay in your session for 24 hours, right? You can go back and look at the data at any point of time, at any particular timestamp. Or if you have done an insert on the table, right? Or you have done a delete on the table. And if you want to see before delete what is my data set, you can use the statement query id and then look at the data set as well. You can go and query your data at a particular timestamp or before a particular statement by using the query id, or you can go back by number of seconds, minus 300 seconds, minus 500. You go by number of seconds, you can go back and look at the timestamp of your data, sorry, snapshot of your table. So, and you can have time travel retention period for 1 day. By default, 0. Default is 1. You can set it up 0 as well. And fail safe period 0. That means for temporary tables and transient tables, you don't have fail safe. So this particular thing until so transient is like a regular table. You have to drop it if you want to drop the table. One is the default time travel retention period, and there is no fail safe. Permanent table, standard edition. That means in standard edition, you can have 1 day as default and you have a fail safe of 7 days. It keeps the data for 7 days. and permanent table in the different editions apart from standard, enterprise, and all this stuff. You can have your time travel for 90 days. That means if you have any sensitive data and if you want to keep it, if in case I want to make sure, then you can go back for 90 days. And then the fail safe is 90 plus 97. The storage charges you will be charged for 97 days if you keep a table for 90 days as the data retention team. That is like a backup option that you are trying to use it in your Snowflake itself. You are keeping it for 7 days. You can keep it for 10 days. You can keep it for 90 days. And after that, still Snowflake keeps the data for 7 days in case if you need the data for recovery. And after 7 days, the data is gone. Okay. And temporary, transient don't have fail safe, but they do have time travel. You can go back within 24 hours as the default. Okay. Permanent in standard is only 1 day of time travel. You cannot go beyond that. By default is 24 hours. In enterprise edition onwards, you can go back for 90 days. But the fail safe, both of them will have fail safe. The other two won't have fail safe. Are we clear? Okay, guys.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay, then we'll call it a day. We'll join at 5 o'clock in the evening. Okay. If you have questions, you can talk to me. I've sent you this particular slide deck as well. Okay. Okay, then, guys. We'll catch up in the evening. Okay. Bye then. So I'll send
Okay,
out a
thank you.
link in the. Thank you. I'll send out a link in the evening, and then we'll meet at 5 o'clock.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.